Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dance of the Soul. I'm Natasha Venter, an intuitive psychic medium who loves helping people to go through life, and that's why I'm called a personal awareness coach. And we have Regan here, who is a hypnotherapist who works with the Newton Institute, and he does amazing work with what he is because he has gone through many different life stories and life destinations, and Regan and I enjoy helping people go through life. And how do we go through it with our soul, going through the dance of it? And that's why we're called the Dance of the Soul. And many of us don't realize that sometimes what we carry forward through past lives can affect us in this life. And with our guest today, Regan has had a near death experience. And our guest, Wendy Williams, who was on my show, Life Clarifications with Natasha, and we talked about her story about her life, and we went over what happened and that kind of thing, and then we talked about her spiritual awakening. We really didn't get into what she really saw and what she really knew. And I know, Regan, you've talked about it, but as the gentleman and the wonderful gift that you are, you don't really go into many details about your stories. And I thought, this might be a good journey for the both of them to show people how you can come back from something so amazing. And that might be a good thing to talk about too, is why do we really want to be here on this earth when our soul knows it can go away?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, Regan, how you been? You weren't here last week.
I know. I forget what the deal was. Oh yeah, I was in Austin, and they changed our plane flight. So I was in the middle. I don't know, where was I? I was probably over Nevada, about right at the time we did the show. And so that was really a great experience. And since matter of fact, let me tell you, because I think the audience can relate to this. You know, when you open yourself to spirit and to the other side, and realizing that you have guides and you're not here all by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
People that are open that way seem to have a lot more miracles that happen to them. You know what they would say, like these 1,000,000 to 1 odds things that happen that kind of show that you're either being used as a vehicle for spirit, like you and I are, or just to get help in their lives and everything. So we're on the airplane heading to Austin, which we just had a ticket we had to use or lose. And we just decided, do we want to go to Memphis or Seattle or, where we're going to go? Because we had planned a thing for my birthday a few years ago, and then COVID hit right as it started. So we didn't fly. And now the airline said, okay, you've got a couple of weeks to use this or lose it. So we said, we just picked Austin at random. So Patty and I have flown many, many times. And this time, for some reasons, the first time we didn't sit together, that they got our seats mixed up, So she's a couple rows up and I'm back. And so I'm wondering, oh, okay, who's gonna sit next to me? And, is it going to be one of those things where you don't say a word, or are you going to talk or whatever? A young gentleman sat down beside me, and right away he started speaking and introducing himself and everything. And we got to talking. And I said, well, why are you going to Austin? He said, well, my brother's having his 40th birthday party, and he just can't miss that. It's going to be a guy's night out, celebrating his brother's 40th birthday. So asked him what he did, and he had an interesting job where he tracks people's computers all day to see how they operate their computer. And they have a system where, because everybody's a little different in the way they operate their computer. And they use it to the information they get from people, they forward on to companies, so that if, for instance, somebody's trying to buy something online and the company's wondering if this may be a fraud or something, they can see if the person who's ordering has the same characteristics as the person who normally has those characteristics. So it's just kind of a good way. He says, well, we kind of snoop on people but this is what they do, you know. I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was interesting. So then he asked what I did, and I told him, I said, well, I'm a hypnotherapist with the Newton Institute, and we help people to, uh, visit heaven, go to heaven and back, and spend a couple hours there. And he was real intrigued. We started talking. He'd been interested in Buddhism for a while, and he meditates, that sort of thing. Anyway, we got there. I gave him a nice handshake, and I said, "Wow, it was really nice sitting next to you. I'm glad we had a good talk." He said, "Yeah, that was really great." Off we went. So I'll shorten this up a bit. We took an Uber to our place. We got settled in. About 3 hours later, we got hungry. We said, "Well, where do we want to go to eat?" And so we didn't rent a car. We figured each night we were there, we're going to walk to a different part of Austin, go to a different, this section, because there's so many different sections and right
Mm-hmm.
off the downtown area. So we walked a couple of miles, and there's this row of new restaurants up and down. There's probably about 7 or 8 different restaurants. We said, well, we want to get some walking in, so let's walk to see what all 7 are. We'll decide on one of them. Actually, we got down to the end. I didn't even see this one, but Patty had. She said, well, let's go back to here. It's called Hoagies,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't think it's, no, not Hoagies, bangers, like sausages,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't realize it till we got in there. This is a sausage place, So we go in there, and they have these long, like picnic tables that you can set probably about 10 people at a table, and you share your table
Mm-hmm.
with other people, which was kind of interesting. So
It's a community. It's a community, all one and all.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we sat down, we ordered, we're eating, and I'm looking towards you, and all of a sudden Patty's across from me. She looks over, and she goes, "Oh my God, oh my God!" And sitting right down next to me was the guy from the airplane. His brother was at the same table with us. Now,
Oh my gosh.
it's like goosebumps.
I love
so did he.
synchronicity. I love
Oh,
synchronicities. Those are the little magical
aren't it?
moments of
Yeah.
miracles.
And okay, this is too much to be a coincidence here. And the fact that we had talked about his spirituality and that sort of thing. And he looked over at me, he says, okay, Regan, give me your card. I'm going to check this out. God's kind of telling me something here,
That's funny.
So that was the way we started our trip. And more started happening. We started realizing just one quick thing. In Austin, they have what we call I Love You wall. That's in part of the town. It's where people come from all over the country, and they stand by the wall, and there's a big I love you on it, and people take their pictures, So we go to the wall, there's nobody there, but we start taking the pictures. A couple of young girls come up, and they say, oh, we'll take your picture. They did that. Then we took their pictures and stuff. And then I don't know how we got into it, but all of a sudden we're talking about God. We're talking about the afterlife, angels, and all that kind of stuff. We had about a half an hour conversation with these 2 young girls. So we
oh my.
we walked away from it, and it was right at the I love you wall. Okay, so that's what made it significant, because this was all about, we were talking about love,
Mm-hmm.
So and then the rest of the time, oh boy, the rest of the time it was stuff that happened between Patty and I, which was showing me that I got more work to do. Testing me on some things.
As there's light, there's also the shadows. So
Yeah.
it's like, and it's amazing when you really pay attention to the parallels or the polar parts of that it can be really magical, because they bring you up to show that we're helping you. Oh, and by the way, we got to do this little bit of work here too, don't we?
Yeah, and that made it okay. Nothing bad or anything happened, but it just was showing me that even though I thought I was doing a lot more, so Patty, because she's so busy, I thought I was doing very, very well, but apparently I could do more. So
I like how you took a little breath before that moment
instead of fighting it. So it's really helped me. She's an angel. She's really helping me to to progress. So
good for you. Good for you. Well, I think this is a perfect segue to bring in the magic of what a miracle it is. Not necessarily to do the life, the close to death moment, but the magic that it can bring coming out of it, and how much it can bring awareness to us. And I think that the segue of synchronicity and all the magic that comes together because I know with Wendy, your story, and I'll bring you in here in a second, sweetie, that story of how, just everything came together so that things were protected, and I
Yeah.
know, Regan, you were even in the hospital at this time, so that the system made sure that you had the opportunity to come back. So let's bring Wendy in. Hi, Wendy.
Hello.
And welcome back. Well, actually, to the Dance of the Soul, but not to Life Clarifications. So
Thank
welcome,
you.
welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me and having me as your guest.
Yeah. It's really fun. I don't know. We've been doing this over a year now, and it's just nice to just have a conversation about what's important, this way. No matter how, we get a lot of viewers after the show. We get some watching the show. But it's kind of a healing and something nice for both of us, so we love having guests on the show to give it a little diversity here.
Yes, 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 yes. So there's a lot of similarities in a non-similarity way that you two have done. You're both hypnotherapists,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that Regan, does through the Newton Institute, and Wendy, you do it you're not connected to the Newton Institute, right?
I'm not. I trained with Brian Weiss. I trained with one of your
Oh,
students,
yeah.
and I
Yeah,
trained
yeah.
with one of Dr. Newton's students, but I'm not
Yeah.
the Newton Institute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
affiliated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have gone through Dr. Weiss's training,
Yes.
the program and everything. And I on my website, I have 2 of his videos on there, in the past life regression section. I remember seeing him maybe 20 years ago or something when he did the Many Lives, Many Masters book,
Yes.
and then watched him on YouTube and everything. So, you're lucky to have trained with him. That's really great.
Yes, I feel very fortunate.
Yeah. So let me, I'll clear up what happened to me real quick first. Excuse me.
That's what you get for trying to eat real quick before you come on the show, Regan.
Peanut butter, yeah. So what actually happened to me, I didn't have what you call the classic near-death experience. It just was when I was in the hospital and when they thought I was close to death for a month. That's when I did some reflection and I decided to become a Newton Institute Life Between Life therapist. So when I actually visited the other side, it was through the Newton Institute process, where we go and spend a couple hours there and come back, which is like a near-death experience.
Yes.
Yeah, they're basically the same thing. It's just a different way of getting to downtown,
Taking a different train.
Yeah. So, Wendy, what was the circumstances with you? How did this experience happen?
Sure. What caused my NDE? I was newly pregnant. It was summer of 1997, and I was working at home alone, and everything had been looking great. It had just that one doctor visit because it's only 10 weeks along, and we were very, very excited to be expecting, and it would be our second child. We had also lost 2 children via ectopic pregnancies and years of infertility. So this was like a very anticipated pregnancy.
Wow.
Good news. And something just didn't feel right as I was working at home that day. I just had more and more heartburn, which I'd been calling the doctor about, which seemed odd to me at only 10 weeks pregnancy. And the other thing was I was having precognitive dreams, but I didn't know what a precognitive dream was. And in the dream, it was the same dream almost every night. I would just see this big sailing ship and everything would rip and tear off it in this terrible storm out at sea. And so winches and cleats and everything's like flying off it. The masts break off and the ship breaks in 2 and goes down. Well, that's not very hard to interpret. Girl, your ship's about to go down. But I just didn't understand. And plus, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Other than pay attention, really
Right.
pay attention. So I think it was my guides and my body trying to say, pay attention here. Don't be asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
So I'm at home that day. My husband's at work with one car. Our nanny's at the park with our daughter, our little 18-month-old with the other car. And all of a sudden, I get this sense of impending doom. And I have never felt that before or since. It was a very specific feeling. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong? So I go rushing into the bathroom again, thinking I'm going to be sick. And instead, I get in there and it felt like someone had stabbed a knife into my abdomen. I'm literally looking down at it like, how did that happen? What happened?
Wow.
And it felt like an organ burst, which I think was all that ripping and tearing on the ship too, and the
Hmm.
and so I pass out on the floor. And I only came to because there was just this insistent male voice saying, Wendy, you've got to wake up. And he just would not leave me alone. And so I open my eyes, I'm disoriented because I'm like laying on my side on the bathroom floor. And the whole bathroom is just lit up with angels. And there's about
Wow.
5 of them, and they're huge. And they're floating just off the floor. There's so much light coming from every one. And the same angel, Archangel Michael, said to me, you've got to call for help now or you're going to go home. So my response was, well, I can't walk. And his response was quite telling. And he said, you only have to be willing to try. If you're willing to try, we can help you. So it took me a few attempts to get up on my hands and knees. And the moment I did that, it was like being gently lifted up and flown to the telephone. Because this is 1997. You know, we didn't have cell phones glued in our hands, stuck in our back pocket.
Yeah.
Now. So they get me to the phone, to the landline. And I think for 1 second, who am I supposed to call? Am I supposed to call 911? But the angel didn't say that. So call for help to me meant call my husband at work because he was 5 minutes away. And I give him great credit. I got him on the phone right away. So miracle continue. I have never reached him at work. I get him on the phone and I give him great credit because all I said was, can you drive me to the hospital now? Right now. And he said, yes, I'm on my way. And I could hear him slam down the phone.
Wow.
So that was perfect response. And I call the OB office and tell them what's happening. I tell them my abdomen is really distending and there's no bleeding because I'm sure they're thinking, no external bleeding. I'm sure they're thinking, miscarriage, what's going on here? And what they said was, when you get here, don't park. I'm going to bring a wheelchair down for we don't want you walking. So they whisk me up into the physician's office, which thankfully, perfectly is right at the hospital. They can't visualize anything in the ultrasound room because it's just a massive bleed. So all they're seeing is black on the screen. So the physician ultrasonographer runs and gets a physician. He comes in and lets me know we need to admit you on the floors. So they do that. And to shorten this up, because I want to give you time to comment, and let's do our compare and contrast. What happens is I'm in the hospital for a week. We do surgery on day 3 or day 4 because I didn't want surgery. No one wants to do surgery on a pregnant woman. You don't know what you're doing surgery on because they couldn't visualize. There also was a delay in getting blood for me because there had been a train accident and evidently that had used up all the A negative blood type. So there was a delay to get blood going. But so I'm being taken great care of, but just painkillers, morphine, blood transfusions. Obviously, this is not what you want going on in the first trimester of your pregnancy, but there just wasn't any choice. And I agreed on about day 3 or 4, I agreed to the surgery because my hematocrit just kept going down and down and down. And the physician said, Wendy, you're officially bleeding out. We can't pump blood in. You're still clearly losing it from somewhere. So we need to do surgery to keep you here. And I knew he was absolutely right because I could feel myself detaching more and more. And it concerned me. I didn't really care. I just was feeling done. I just was feeling pretty depleted. Like there just is not enough gas in this car. to operate it in any way,
Hmm.
shape, or form, despite all the transfusions. So the night before the surgery, I'm just trying to visualize the best outcome. The minute I'm alone in the hospital room, the minute I picture the best outcome, I pop right out of my body and I see the light above me, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, look at that. I've got to check that out." It was just so compelling to go up. So I take one little look over my shoulder and I'm like, "Oh, wow, she's whiter than a ghost. She is in a really bad way." And then I kind of go, she's fine. I just have to go check out this light." And I'm like, "Why am I referring to myself in the third person?" That was also interesting, but I was becoming my pure soul self again, and I felt fantastic. I'm not in pain anymore. I'm not worried. It's like, the world's my oyster. I'm checking out the light. So I float out of the hospital and I'm looking all around, just taking in how beautiful everything is. But again, I notice the light. And this I have a second where I think, "Oh, please don't make me walk through that long tunnel." I think that had worked its way enough into pop culture that I had the perception of, gee, this must be a near-death experience. I'm supposed to go through a tunnel.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
too tired. I'm not gonna make it through the tunnel. So the minute I think that, this beautiful escalator comes in, and it's just as lit up as my bathroom had been with the angels, with that angelic light. So I plop myself on the escalator, and I'm just so grateful I can catch a ride up and up and up. At the top of the escalator, there is a waiting committee, this welcoming, it's my soul group. All my grandparents are there. My grand
Hmm.
my grandparents on my mom's side, I knew very well, but my dad's parents, I never met because they died before I was born. But yet I knew exactly who they were. Archangel Michael was there, other angels were there. They gave me this huge hug. I could have basked in that forever. It
Hmm.
was unconditional love, and it is full support and no judgment. We don't feel that very often on earth.
Mm-mm.
So just to be receiving that hug, and I am trying to, like, peer over their shoulders because I, like, so wanna, like, go on and check out and, like, do everything else at home. I'm just so excited to be there. And Michael tells me, "Welcome home. You made it. You've done nothing wrong. You can absolutely stay. It's your choice. You're not going to be blamed. There's no shame in staying. But if you want to go back, you're going to have to decide quickly because you don't have very much time. So I'm going to tell you what I can tell you, which is if you choose to go back, you will have a successful surgery tomorrow. You will fully regain your health, and your baby will be born healthy."
Oh, wow.
Like, wow, weight of the world off my to be told those two things. And then the third thing he said was, "Life will be very difficult, probably for many years, because you're not on your path." So, of course, I'm, like, horrified. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I'm 36 years old. I, like, so wanna be doing the right thing. What am I not doing? What am I supposed to start? What am I supposed to stop?" And he just shook his head because 'cause I'm looking at him like, "Okay, I'm ready for the big number 3 reveal here in this preview of coming attractions." But he just shakes his head. So I'm looking around at everyone else thinking, "Come on, someone's gotta give." There's this group here of, like, 20. And they just start being silly and they're like duct taping their mouths and like throwing the key away. And I'm like, okay, I just need to settle down and be grateful for what I've been told and just leave it at that because they're not supposed to tell me clearly. So I'm gonna have to figure it out myself. So Michael asked me then, "What do you want to do?" And the minute he asked me that, all I could see was my toddler's adorable face. And to imagine I was gonna have another baby who's gonna be healthy and I was gonna regain my health. So I told him, "Put me back in, coach. I'm ready to go back." And they gave me another huge, huge hug. That time I realized it wasn't just unconditional love, Not that that's not everything, but they were downloading energy to me because I don't think I had enough energy to make it through that surgery otherwise, because that was a several-hour surgery the next day.
Mhm.
What they discovered was my uterus had ruptured, the fundus at the top of it, and that's an aorta. So they estimated I lost 3/4 of my blood supply during that process in that week of having those two NDEs. So I say, put me back in, and everyone gives me that hug. I go down the escalator, and everyone's like waving, and they like move into cheerleader mode, and I'm just like looking at them, like, yes, I know I made the right decision, but you're also feeling like, oh wow, I could have stayed. So I go back down, and I just plop into my body so gently. And I do have the surgery the next day. Everything's just like the angel said. And I go home about 3 days later, recuperate at home for 6 weeks because it was a serious surgery, and I went home quite a few quarts low on
Mhm.
the blood supply. Go back to work. Everything is great for about 6 weeks. Job I love. Everyone's so happy to have me back. Great performance evaluations. Everything's wonderful. Except, I'm still recuperating. This had been a big deal. And my boss calls me into his office on a Friday afternoon. I've been back at work 6 weeks, as I mentioned, after recouping at home for 6 weeks. So it's about 3 months after this had all happened, and it was early November. And I don't think a thing about it. My boss and I get along great. I don't think anything about his request. I thought we're going to chat about the weekend, or he wants to tell me something to do the next week. Instead, I walk into his office, and he looks like beyond dejected. And I see human resources sitting there with a file on the table. So we all know what this is. It's the infamous Friday afternoon layoff.
Wow.
I get laid off. Of course, I'm pregnant. I carry the family insurance. I'm really distraught. This was a tough one. It's a really tough one to take. And I will pause at that moment. Thank you for letting me tell that long story.
No, it's a gift
Wow.
that you were able to negotiate all that. I know that many of us go through life-altering experiences, and it's interesting how the universe does step in and support us, and going through that NDE, that it's amazing that you know being able to come back. I remember my dad kind of having something close to that, and him having to make the choice to come back, even though he knew he wasn't going to live. And then, Regan, I know that you kind of just scooted over that hospital, a month in the hospital, and going close to death. And I've heard a couple of stories that you had some close moments when you were in the hospital, also, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, just moments of coming to a reckoning. Like when they thought it was like stage 4 cancer or something, and I never smoked. They said, "Did you ever smoke?" And I said, "Well, I did when I was 10 for a couple of times, but I never inhaled." I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
So it was just fun. It was fun to light them up, and puff on them, but I never inhaled, But it's just amazing. Like I think when you say near-death experience nowadays, pretty much everybody knows kind of what you mean.
Mhm.
20 years ago, it was kind of a new, when Dr. Moody, I think, came out with that, his book, and I forget that was called. They sort of started talking about that. And then a lot of people had things like that, but they never told anybody because they were ridiculed or,
Mhm.
and
Called crazy.
right. And nowadays, yeah, it's not so much that way as it used to be. But now, um, with what I do, where I help people to go and have. It's like what I'm doing with the Newton Institute is we found a way to have a near-death experience without the death part.
Exactly. Without the
Yeah,
drama and trauma.
right. You
Mhm.
just we but it's like we've discovered in all this research we've done that we all have this ability, but in Wendy's case it kind of kicked in there right when, because she's got angels and guides and everything on the other side that are looking after her. so they had to like open that door and be like a direct contact with Wendy so that she could get through that experience, but also to make some choices,
Mhm.
some life choices. And she did the brave thing, I mean, to come back knowing that life was going to be very difficult when you could have stayed there in that beautiful place, and to bring another child, another soul into the world to have experience. So, Wendy, my hat's off to you for that. That's
Thank you. You're so
it,
kind.
well, I mean, wow. I mean, but that's where we're finding out that there's a lot of brave, like this Earth planet right now has a lot of brave souls. Probably Wendy, you probably run into them in your practice, and people that are exceptionally full of love, exceptionally selfless, and that's what it's going to take to get this planet through these crazy times right now.
Mm-hmm.
But Wendy, I mean, it's like, you decide to come back and times are tough, but they're tough, but here you are, you got through it. And, now how's life now? Is it still tough, or is
No,
it?
life is wonderful now, but it took several more stages to get there.
Yeah.
So I get laid off. It's November of 97, so we don't know. It's the beginning of a recession. And as that joke goes, it's a recession when your neighbor's out of work. It's a depression when you're out of work. Well, 1 week to the day after I'm laid off, my husband's software company fails. And he was one of 5 owners in it. So he went to payless paydays and
Wow.
working 80 hours a week, just trying to get everything settled, trying to fulfill contracts. What do you do about the lease? Just so many things going on. So that was a big deal. And as I said, we didn't have any health insurance, heavily mortgaged, had just purchased a van because we're expecting the second baby. And things were just really, really challenging for quite a time period. We were fortunate in I was trying to negotiate different payment plans with our lenders, various lenders, and no one was going for it. As I said, the economy was just taking a real hard dip
Yeah.
down at that time. Thankfully, we were saved by Bank of Mom, and my mother made a very meaningful, kind loan to us that saved our bacon. So
Yeah.
we were able to keep our house and just keep the lights on until he got his company sold. So there must have been some real astrology going on for either both of us or for the planet too at that time, because then our baby was born healthy on March 13th, which was a Friday, and he went back to work having sold his company and went into the new company that now employed their company on that Monday, the 16th. So everything came back together in mid-March, and then I went back to work 3 months later after I'd recovered from the birth. So, and then it was hard to catch my breath, though, to answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
because I had not been home from the hospital. I was approved for what they now call a drive-through delivery, where they were approving these very short stays, and that was all the insurance I could get was 24 hours, including labor. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like, get that baby catch. Okay, bye-bye. You're doing great.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness, that is too fast for a lot of women. A lot of
Yes.
families.
And they're done that.
So I'm home the next day after my daughter's born, just beyond grateful. Anyone is grateful to be holding their newborn.
Yeah.
To have a healthy newborn after what she and I had been through together was a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm holding her, and I was by myself. I think I was nursing her or whatever. And I could hear Archangel Michael say, clear as a bell, your contract with your husband is complete. I almost dropped the baby. I was
So yeah, you got to think. Don't you think? What does that mean exactly?
well,
Does
yeah,
that mean we're going to lose my husband, or am I going to get a divorce, or what's going to
asked for
happen?
more information. I'm like,
Wow.
what does that mean? Because your contract being complete, well, until you know what the contract is, that doesn't have to mean a divorce or a death or a desertion.
Right.
whatever it might mean. I knew what he meant the moment he said it. I knew we were heading toward a divorce. And I found out years later what my husband's, what my primary soul contract was with my husband. And it was for us to have a long-term marriage that we would both grow from considerably and to have beautiful children together. And I could see Michael underlying the REN in children, like,
Mhm.
girl, like you just had the second one.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
catch my breath. So that was really difficult. So we did the best we could, but we did choose to divorce when our daughters were 6 and 8, when the youngest was entering first grade, was going to be in school full time. So I knew that was just a natural cut over point. And again, we were very, very fortunate because I'm the only child, so it's the only grandchildren. My mother had been retired for maybe a year or two. We were living in Seattle. She was living in Boston. And more friends and people had been saying to her, because her family and friends in that area had been falling away. And more people have been saying to her, well, why don't you consider moving out where
Moving.
Wendy is, because she's not going to be moving back. She's been out there for 10 plus years. She's not going to move back to Boston. So my mom moved out here and she became team grandmom. And what I mean by that, we had the children in a 50-50 residential schedule, but she was this beautiful neutral party. If I needed help with pickups or having the kids right after school, she would help me because it was helping the family. It was helping our daughters. If my ex-husband needed help, she would do the same thing. So she
Wow.
was this neutral team grandmom. So it was perfect. And it was really what our family needed. And we were very, very grateful for it. My mom and I then purchased a home together, and my former husband stayed in our previous home just to keep stability, keep continuity going. And my mother and I, we purchased a home that had an extra back lot because we wanted to build our dream duplex on it. So mom and I'd be next door to each other, but not in the same house. Each have our own household, each have our own
Mhm.
plan. So we were able to accomplish that. It took 4 years, but we did get that done. And when my daughters were 12 and 14, so 6 years later, I'd rebuilt life. Life
Mhm.
was looking really good at that point again. So I looked around and it's like, what's missing? Oh, it's time to meet a great guy because I've
Yeah.
completely reinvented my life and I'm just happy in every way. So I'm like scratching my head though. I'm like, okay, I haven't been on a date in 25 years. How do you meet someone nowadays? And I went to a good source. I asked younger girlfriends who were actively dating and said, how do you meet? How did you meet your fiance? How did you meet, whomever? And they told me, well, you go on match.com. And I'm like, what? I don't know what this is. Does not compute. So they're filling me in on online dating. It's now 2010. So that's what was popular at the time, still is. I think the statistic is more people are meeting their spouse through
Yeah.
some
Yes.
It's a good site. Yeah.
than any other way. It's not through
Mhm.
church or friends of friends anymore, the way it used to be. So
But
then
isn't it amazing how that when we're going through life, and I know this because I was going through those same years, I was going through a lot of trying to catch my breath between a lot of that's the years that my family passed away, was through the same years that yours was kind of going through it's
wait,
turmoils. Yeah, and I bet you Regan during the 97 through 2000 um it was not you were doing a lot of awakenings too, it sounded like.
Yeah. A lot of changes.
A lot of
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. From like 92 to present. Always doing a lot of self work, a lot of work that way.
But that's what we're here to do, and that's what's amazing about how, like you were saying, that there's these planets that get the world to do the work,
Mhm.
And then we have our personal story in the mix of that. And
Right.
that's what's amazing is when you look at those years of 97 to 2005, how many people went through a major uproar in
Mhm.
their life.
Mhm.
And that seems so long ago now.
It
I know,
does.
but
Seems like
at the
flames ago.
but at the same time, though, I know for me that if me going through what I went through there, that is the foundation. The total moment when life said, Natasha, here's your chance to be who you're to be.
Natasha 2.0, looking beautiful.
Exactly. Well, my husband even said, you're not the same woman that I married, during that change. And so it's amazing when we go through that. And I know that Regan, you went through your hospital stay where, you went through that. It's time for me to get my stuff together and
Yeah.
make some decisions.
Well, yeah, I know. Part of me thought, I know I was so comfortable though, and part of it says, well, if it's time for me to go, I'm okay. But the other part of me says, I'm just starting to get the hang of things. So I kind of don't, I don't kind of want to go yet, because why was I doing all this if I can't, finish? And then about 8 months, 10 months later is when I had my life between lives experience, where I actually saw where I decided to do this work, to help other people, you
Oh,
know. And I had, my guide was Rebazar, who, it was his name, Rebazar. And then I have another guide over there, Late C, a Chinese gentleman who, when he looks at you, you just want to laugh. You want to laugh and smile your guts out, because there's so much love. But isn't that, see, this is the thing, because, a lot of times we get people and they say, oh, Wendy, you had chemicals in your brain and things were going this, and you just made all this stuff up, and it's just your imagination and everything. But if you experience that,
right.
you go, there's no way in the world anybody can convince you it wasn't real,
Mm.
and
It
with
was
all the,
those data and verifications from the NDEs. I mean, there's been such studies made of them over the last decades that
yeah.
doesn't hold water anymore.
No, it's just, I mean, if people don't want to believe it, they're just not going to believe it. But what we're hoping, and doing the show and having you on in that too, is that people start seeing this is a real thing. This is something that's, if it was made up and something like that, oh my God, it's the most coolest made up thing ever in the world, because it changes people's lives.
Mhm.
Makes people more loving and kind and compassionate. And people that have near death experiences have, like Saved by the Light, Daniel Brinkley, or Daniel, I want to say Daniel Brinkley or something. He's actually been there 3 times. He died 3 times and came back, but he came back and started hospice centers. I think he has 30 something hospice centers,
Mhm.
before that, so he counsels people before they pass away,
Mhm.
So I'll just tell everybody out there that Wendy, what she experienced is just what the research is showing. When we put people in deep trance and they go there, where you have a soul group,
Mhm.
you have guides that are there, that you get this buckets of love dumped all over you. That's the most love that you ever felt in your life.
Mhm.
um, and everything they do is nurturing and positive and helpful. So, you know, oh, there's Susan. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
substance for experience, right?
Right.
Um, so it's nice that nowadays we can kind of talk about this kind of thing, and actually people, they're like, if I'm at a dinner party and they ask what I do and I start talking, pretty soon that's all the room's talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I have to say I'm at someone else's party, and I go, look, I don't, here's a card, and we can talk privately, because I don't want to take up the whole night,
Right.
because
Right.
people just don't, I'm sure when you've told your experience to people that you trust, and their eyes just, like, because they're thinking of the possibilities, or
Mhm.
because we all know inside that there's God, or we're striving towards something greater than ourselves. But
Mhm.
luckily, Wendy, you had, I mean, this is what you had about 20 years now, or 22, 23 years or so since it
Yes.
happened. And when you think about it, doesn't it feel like it just happened? I mean,
Yes, that's one of the hallmarks of the NDEs is
they,
people don't talk about them often because it just takes a while to unpack. I didn't talk about it for over 20 years. So
Oh,
there's
really?
we're popping open.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
I just started sharing it much more recently, which is what IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which has support groups and
Yeah.
chapters in so many different areas. They found that that's very typical because a lot of us, we just don't know what to make of it. We're
Yeah.
working to integrate it.
Yeah.
So, and just the detail, it really never goes away. Whereas
Yeah.
you can't remember, you can't describe. It's like being back there each time I tell the story. So
Mhm.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
there's like more depth and breadth to it. And as people ask questions, I can feel and hear and get, the answers to more. So it's more thoroughly explored. So
Yeah.
it's been quite therapeutic and helpful to share the story.
Yeah,
I
that's
bet, I
good.
bet, I bet. I know for me that me talking about a lot of times me being born, because to me, that's when my soul, I mean, I remember I can even picture the inside of my mother,
Mhm.
as I'm coming through and then popping out and seeing the doctor's face,
So unique and fascinating.
I can even remember the white mask, his eyes and his round face, and he had the 60s cap on his head, that the doctors did, and the details of that. But, and I haven't told that story. I can go years in between telling that story and it would come out in that same detail.
Mhm.
And I didn't have a near death experience, but my soul was so alive,
Mhm.
and awake, I guess, for lack of a better
Conscious
word.
recall.
It's just
Yeah.
recall. It's just that moment. And that's the miracle, that when you know that kind of divine love, there's no recall. It's here. It's a print. It's a print on us. And that's the one thing that I always prayed, that my husband would know how to do some major shifting, because some people have to go through a near death experience to wake up.
Mhm.
I've heard people who say that they're perfectionists, they're hard on people, la da 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 da, and then they had a near death experience, and all of a sudden they don't really care.
Mhm.
They have this moment of realization, and some of us, like Sue said, that there's no substitute for experience.
Mhm.
And I know that going through the hypnotherapist and that kind of stuff, there is some realization and there's the real thing, but there's something about having that physical interaction with the body
Mhm.
and the soul deciding not to be attached anymore, or deciding to be attached.
Mhm.
And that's the difference, I think, between the near-death experience and a hypnotherapy moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That there's that, the shift in how our bodies go through that.
Mhm.
Because when we go through the physical thing, we physically have to heal.
Mhm.
We physically have to go through it, where when we're coming out of the hypnotherapy session, it's the mental, emotional, and
Mhm.
yes, some physical experience, but it's not the losing 3/4 of your blood.
Yeah.
It's not that, and that's part of the body upgrading
Mhm.
into its new knowing.
Mhm.
You almost have to be stripped down to nothing sometimes to rebuild up. And I know I did that after
Higher
my
ground.
parents passed. That I stripped myself so far down that I lost all parts of me,
Mhm.
and I had to rebuild who I was.
And part of that can be that difficult balancing of the ego and just getting more into our hearts, et cetera, and getting our masculine and feminine balanced. I mean, there's just so many things that can be going on through that
Hmm.
process that we may not be aware of, unless you meditate, communicate with your guides, have sessions,
Hmm.
whatever your path is to find your own truth.
Yeah.
Yes.
And people listening out there too. Now we've done 65,000, had 65,000 successful sessions so far, and every single one of them had a guide or an angel or someone looking after them. So what we've concluded from that research is that we all have guide. So,
Oh, yes.
you know, yeah. And as crazy as that might seem to some people, it's okay. We're just telling you what we're finding, and it's, as difficult as life could be, especially on Earth right now, and knowing that all these people that are going through this stuff in the Ukraine and everything, and the people dying and everything, they're taken care of. They have people watching them. We don't know it's why they are having to go through this. It's either karmic or something, but we found out that people actually choose their lives, and the difficulties they're going to go through, just like what Wendy's had to go through a lot of difficult things. I mean, I know I've had some regular clients that have just had like one child that died pre-birth, or had a miscarriage or something, and it just messes them up for years, and so having to go through all that. One of the masters told me one time that when you're getting somewhere spiritually, when you can be calm in the middle of a tornado, and yeah.
Yes.
And they went in to me prior to this near-death experience. I went on when I was 44, so I went on a Buddhist retreat. And in that time of open-eyed meditation for 9 hours a day for 8 days, about the sixth day, I was taken out of my body and to a place of nothingness in a way. And I saw visions of everybody that I knew dying, burning up and everything. And even the planets disappeared, the universe disappeared. I was in a nothingness. And then what I got from that is I'm in this no place, which felt like everything. It's like nothing but everything. And it was a really cool place. I realized that everything that I had was going to be destroyed so that I could start a new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So a few months after that, my wife asked for a divorce just out of the blue. And I lost my business, my dog, all my kid, everything I had was gone. And because I had that kind of vision ahead of time, I was able to get through it with a lot less scarring, a lot less emotions. But it was hard, I mean, just everything just ripped away all at once. And if I hadn't had them show me already to prepare me, would have been really, really tough. So when they told you, and you
preview of coming attractions,
right? So like did you think about, like, Wendy, when you were going through all these tough times, did you think back to that experience you had and do, they said it was going to be tough?
Yep,
okay.
April's got that one right. Yep, they just got that one right. I just ticking them off.
So you somehow just know, even though it's tough, everything's going to be okay. Even though it's tough, you just have to go through what you have to go through.
And things got so much better once it was 2010, because when I got onto Match.com, the minute I changed the parameters, the distance that you're willing to meet someone from, with the zip codes, I moved it to 10 miles. And the moment I did that, I saw someone come up and I'm like, I know him, I know him, I know him.
Uh-huh.
And what that turned into, the last thing you're going to love, Regan, the last sentence he wrote in his dating profile. No one has ever written this. Any woman on a spiritual journey, particularly someone interested in having an LBL, we have to meet.
Oh, wow.
He literally wrote LBL. So I'm like Googling, what's an LBL? And that's what led me to Journey of Souls.
Yeah.
He's the soulmate with the contract to wake me up spiritually. He finds my first Newton therapist for me, drives me to my first past life regression, drives me to my first LBL, etc.
Wow.
So that's how it started to come full circle. And then a few years later, I become his past life regressionist because I was getting such amazing results.
Yeah. Wow.
The sessions, it just changed my life, soup to nuts. Everything was different. Everything was better. Everything made more sense. Everything was more peaceful, more calm, more loving. I got out of my left brain finally, and I've had my MBA degree since I was 22. So that took quite a few smacks on the head to get me out of my left brain. And then I was stuck because I knew I was supposed to be writing books, and I just was putting up resistance, resistance, resistance. I also was not speaking publicly because it just terrified me. So he was coaching me for both, which was perfect because he was already, he'd become a published writer because I helped him get published. He didn't know how to self-publish. I didn't either, but I
Hmm.
asked my guides, and the next morning when I woke up, there it was in my email. Here's how you self-publish on
Yeah.
Amazon. And I'm like, what?
There again, we have to
What?
ask.
You have to
We
ask.
have to ask.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go. Help
Yeah.
Exactly.
me. And
And the,
that's the thing is that when we ask our guides, where do I go from here? It's amazing what lays in our lap
yes,
if we're
it is.
awake, if we're awake enough to pay attention to
Yes.
go.
So the minute he's published, he's autographing the book for me, and he hands it to me and he says, "Your turn. Will you please
Oh, wow.
get it done?" And again, I'm like resisting. I'm super busy, don't have time, don't have the knowledge, blah, 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 blah. Every excuse in the book. Sorry, bad pun.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is I do a session for him because he's got significant pain. He had been a professional athlete, high contact sport. He'd broken his neck and he wanted to live without painkillers. He wanted to have a good life and be able to be active and not be in so much pain. So I offered to do a session for him. And because he'd had other sessions, he said, "Yeah, I'm not a great trance subject. I have to warn you." It's like, "Yeah, but you're an athlete. You know how to visualize." Because there's no way you were a Kodak All-American without being able to visualize.
Yeah.
I knew I could use that. And then what happened was the tape jammed for the recording tape. Fortunately, my guides warned me. They said it's going to be the most difficult session of your lifetime. Use 2 recording devices. So I
Oh,
also recorded using my brand new iPhone. I barely knew how to figure out how to turn on the recording. It recorded a 4.5-hour session perfectly. The MP3 doesn't work, but I can't hand him my phone. So how do I give him the recording? I can't get
yeah.
it off the phone. I go to the store. Verizon's like, "You can't record for 4.5 hours on these." I'm like, "Well, it's right there." And so I sit down to type. It's like, I don't know what to do. I've got to give him this information because he thinks the session was 2 hours. It was four and
Yeah.
a half hours. Therefore, there's 2.5 hours of subconscious, higher self, guide, divine type information. I can't sort out what he knows, doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I say to him, "Do you want me to just type you like this really quick and dirty transcript?" And he's like, "Oh, could you please?" And I'm like, "Okay, this is going to take some time, but I will do this." And I sit down on a Saturday, I type for a couple hours, and I take a break, and then when I look at it and I scroll back to the beginning, I almost fall out of my chair because it says Regression Healing 1. It's got the subtitle of the book. It's got my name as author. It's got the table of contents. I've got notes to myself to include a resource guide at the end for forgiveness techniques. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is a book,
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
trans." So my guides, they slid it in sideways because I was so stubborn and so resistant, telling them I can't write a book. Well, I'm supposed to write 20 this lifetime. So fighting with them about the first book.
You better get going. Well,
I have
that's really good.
4s coming out and I have number 5s drafted. So we're picking up the pace here.
Man, oh man, really good. Really good, Wendy.
Congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. But that's what happened. And he and I found 21 lives together. So that took us 8 years to get those straightened out. It was that first contract to Wake Me Up Spiritually was fantastic. But the second contract I had with him was to break my heart repeatedly until I stood in my power fully without abusing it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's very specific.
Brilliant contract, very specific. It allowed me to transmute my karma because I had karma in 2 areas. But obviously no one enjoys getting their heart broken repeatedly. So we we broke up as romantic partners after 13 months. And I really thought, this is it. This is the end of my life.
Hmm.
Because the pain was just so intense. It was beyond anything I'd ever gone through. And I almost went off the planet because I was just done. It's like, wait
Yeah.
a minute, I'm here with my primary soulmate. I can see the contract for this really positive marriage late in life. Here we are, I can see the contract for us to write together, to be on radio together, to help others with their spiritual awakening. So when we ended that relationship, everything came true, but the guides had to work with all the puzzle pieces and shake that big puzzle all over again. And it all came true in a different way. I help him get published. His first session becomes my book. It's not co-writing them together like I
Right.
thought.
But it's interaction together.
Yes.
It's the interaction together. And that's the thing that we can get the image of something and we think it's going to be black and white. And that's the way it is. Oh, no.
Surrender it. Just surrender it. Just let the guides do their work. So I was chided for trying to be my own guide here on earth because I had just graduated to being a guide for others in my last lives when I was between lives, and I'd graduated from eons working in the Akashic records, and I was now a guide. So when I got here to earth and had trust issues, who do you think I trusted to be my guide?
Yeah.
Me and only me, but that wasn't serving me. And I think that was what part of what that NDE was for, was to show me this support and to show me that others loved me and had this incredible knowledge to help me if I would just get out of my own way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That was me being polite.
No, I hear you. And I know that for me, that that was part of it, that even though I was shy and quiet and people would think that that wasn't me being in my own way, but it was. Everything that I was saying because of my old story was limiting, and it was time for me to just say, I surrender.
Right.
I surrender. And I know, Regan, you did the same thing, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, just listening how you like when your car breaks down and how you just on the side of the road, you surrender. And
Yeah. And it makes it easier. You don't fight
this
it.
man is amazing how
A solution comes. Yeah.
It's like, well, that didn't happen. Okay, where do I go from here?
Yeah. I think the next story of my life would be Plan B,
I was going to say there's 26 letters in the alphabet for a reason. Plan C, Plan D, Plan E.
Right.
Exactly.
Just do it. It's just good. I
always tend to get people say, well, doesn't A plan? And I go, I already go to M. I don't even mess with anything else in between. I'll just go to M.
Wow. Well,
don't give up on us. They're always going to keep helping us. They're always going to find a way, a new way.
Yes.
So the quicker we surrender, the better it's going to be for us.
Yeah. Yep. And for people, I've heard from many mediums or psychics or people that do the spiritual work, and what the guides say from the other side is they just want you to acknowledge that they're there, and then they can start working with you more freely. So it's just like they're in the next room, and anytime you need something, you could go knock on their door and go, I'm stuck, can you help me? Oh yeah, they're there to help you, so that that life the difficulties are much less severe. Even though you see, you have the same, you have two people side by side going through the exact same problem, and one of them kind of floats through it, even though it's hard, and the other one is just bouncing all around, And sometimes we choose to bounce around, because we haven't learned a lesson or something. But, once you have,
it's like Natasha said at the beginning, it's allowing the magic to come in and just the solutions, because the solution is not even the right word. That's too limiting, but just the experiences are so much more beautiful and uplifting than we can imagine if we'll just let it go.
Yeah.
My goal is to be synchronicity. Synchronicity, have the synchronistic moments with, who can I be synchronistic with? Who can I be their synchronicity, and who can be my synchronicity? And it's amazing walking through that magic of, me walking down the hallway of a class of the school, and all of a sudden a student walks out, and I walk down for a while. We have this wonderful magical conversation, and then they go off to their need and I go off to mine. But that moment had magic in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, I have 5 minutes before I have to leave. We're having my wife's birthday party tonight. We have about 20 people that we're having dinner for. So,
of course, happy birthday!
Yeah, I'll tell her that.
And please tell her for me.
Okay.
Please.
And Wendy, we just barely scratched the surface. There's so much to talk about. If you'd be willing, and I'd like to, invite you back another time or two, just so we can continue the conversation, because
that would be fantastic.
It's great to have you on. And
thank you. Yeah, I'd love to help people understand just what's changing in the sessions and how these sessions can help them.
Yeah. Because I wrote about
ways the woo made practical.
I had like 12 different notes down here of things to talk about from what you were talking about, your experience, but we didn't even get a chance to get to them. So you guys can continue the conversation, but I'm going to leave and take care of my.
And actually we're on the hour anyway. So with that, please, Regan, tell people how they can reach you.
Oh, yes. Visit the Afterlife on the screen there. There's some great videos on there. There's even a session on there in the Life Between Lives thing where you can see a young lady going to a past life and then going beyond that to where we all go between lives, and the adventure that she has. Oh, thank you, Susan. She's awesome. She's
I
one
love
of our
her.
regulars here. Yeah.
And she's gone through hypnotherapy years. She's been hypnotherapy has been one of her major healing platforms.
We could even sometime, Wendy, just do another education thing on hypnosis, because so many people I'm surprised that most of the population still doesn't understand hypnosis, and to see how powerful it could be for life-changing things.
The distinction between hypnotherapy and entertainment hypnosis, because they dance like a chicken.
Yeah.
That's not what we're doing. It's not Las Vegas stage.
No, I know. So they don't know. So it would be great.
It's very sacred and very uplifting and very, very personal.
Yeah. Well, I'll see you both another time.
Have fun. Blessings. And I will text you about next week.
Okay. Be good. See you later, Wendy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, Wendy, thank you so much for this gift of being on again to show people how, even though you're not through the Newton Institute, that it's the same idea of helping and bringing light to people and bringing awareness to people. And I know through me that a lot of my meditations have that hypnosis scenario. And it's a different platform, but it is amazing how we can all get somewhere, and it takes tools to help us. I know that I've been going through some stuff in this last month that it took me having a conversation. We helped each other out after our shows a little bit with our personal work here. But how can people get a hold of you, Wendy?
They can reach me via my website, which is my full name, wendyrosewilliams.com. And you can request a complimentary 15-minute phone appointment with me there and explore if I might be of service to you.
Great. Thank you. And we'll talk about another date for you to come on. And I am Natasha Venter, and please get in touch with me if you are looking for, I know so many of us are going through grief right now. It just seems like I was on Twitter the other day and I left 3 comments on 4 different people who had lost family members and grief, and that's one of my specialties and one of my callings is to help people go through the grief process and emotionals and the emotions of what life is. And I know you've gone through the grief process many times, just even breaking up with your soul partner. That's huge of a grief trigger that that one can go through. I know that I've kind of gone through a little bit of that myself. So you can reach me at angelicclarifications.com. And blessings to you. And I am going to actually this week going to be if you're up in Mount Vernon, there's a crystal show, and I am going to be one of the readers there. So,
that's
and
awesome. So people
yes,
can see you there.
exactly. So please join me on Life Clarifications with Natasha, and that'll be Wednesday at 4:00 on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. Blessings, everyone. Have a great Monday and enjoy life as much as you can, because the little things are what the sparks to help us be the miracles. Blessings.